Well, election observation missions, they're part of the European Union's Democratisation and Human Rights Initiative programme. It's important that we observe the elections in various countries. Important in the sense of assisting those countries in developing and improving their democratic, political and electoral processes. But also important in just having a view and a knowledge and creating, if you like, an internationally accepted public record of the elections that have taken place in a country.
Now, how do you assess an election? What's the criteria you use?
Well, the criteria we use, there are essentially three elements. First of all, we look at the complete electoral process, all of the preparations of the election administration, the campaigning period, if there are any legal cases or complaints or appeals, how they're dealt with. We monitor the media and analyse the media, particularly the state media, to see whether the state media, which doesn't belong to any incumbent government or regime, but belongs to the citizens, the people of the country, whether it's meeting its obligations that are laid down in the Constitution to cover all candidates in a fair, balanced and equitable way. We also look at civil society, its role in terms of domestic observation, and the security forces. Are the security forces conducting themselves appropriately in the context of the election?
You've mentioned some of the key areas you will be concentrating on. Will you also be looking at vote bribery, voter rigging? You've mentioned media coverage. Do some of these issues come into your focus?
Well, clearly, as I said, we observe the campaign period. That means we don't just watch the rallies that go on. We actually look at the sort of type of campaigning that people are doing. We look to see whether or not candidates or parties may be abusing the campaigning period via attempting to bribe or buy votes. We also look to see how public state resources are or are not being used. Clearly, it should be preferable that there should be no use of state resources in an election by an incumbent president or incumbent ministers. Because basically what we want to see is that all candidates and parties have a level playing field.
Now, you and your team will be in Uganda until the election process has come to an end. But you've also been observing. You've been here before, you've been here earlier. You came on January the 15th. You've been observing, the process leading into the elections. What are some of the things you've seen that are building up until the election? And does your mandate include speaking out before the conclusion of an election?
Well, we're observers, precisely that. We observe, we note and we report. What we don't want to do and what we cannot do, because it's not in our mandate and we wouldn't want to do it anyway, is to interfere in the process or to attempt to manage or supervise the process. And we also are totally impartial. What matters to us as observers is the electoral process, not the outcome. It may sound rather strange, but actually we don't care who wins. It's the process that matters, not the outcome. So we will go about our business, we will observe, we will make no judgmental public comments about the process prior to the election day. Some 2 or 3 days after the election, we will then issue what we call our preliminary statement, which is our statement covering our initial findings and conclusions. Then some 2 or 3 months after that, the chief observer and myself and possibly one other will return to Uganda for about 4 to 6 days, where we'll present what we call the final report, which goes into much more detail and has a very important section which is recommendations. And these are a series of recommendations that we would make and suggestions as to how changes could be made to improve and develop the democratic, political and electoral processes in Uganda.
Let's move to the role of the observer mission. Many citizens in countries where you actually have been and have been observing are very skeptical about the observer missions. And there is a view that these missions do really very little in the outcome of an election, however contested the result is. What's your take on this?
My take on it is that observers fulfill a useful function because they actually do provide an impartial public record of exactly what took place during an election period. And I think that's quite important. It's important for the citizens of the country concerned, but it's also important for the wider international community. At the end of the day, as I said, it's down to the political will of the governments and the key stakeholders in the various democracies as to whether or not they wish to learn the lessons from one election and try to improve and develop the democratic and political processes for future elections. We're not here to force anybody to do anything.
Finally, it's just a little under 2 weeks to the general election. A lot is unfolding in a very short span. Do you have a message for the people of Uganda?
Well, I suppose the message I would say is to be sure to go out and exercise your democratic right and vote on the 18th of February. What I would say is that my impression is that this election is much calmer, much more peaceful than the previous election, and that's a very good thing because violence has no place in a good democratic process. So my hope and my thoughts to the people of Uganda are please maintain this calm and peacefulness that there has been right the way through the rest of the election campaign and on polling day, and then beyond polling day when the results are announced. Because, as I say, violence really does have no place in a democratic process.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.